of summer, and so many of you are, those of you who have little ones at home, school is in full session, in addition to working from home and everything else. But when we started planning these sessions, we were really excited to talk about the digital divide. And I grew up in downstate Indiana, down around Versailles, so way out in the country. And when I came to the big city for college, I thought my days of slow Wi-Fi, there wasn't even Wi-Fi then, who am I kidding? Slow dial-up were over because I was going to the urban oasis. But what I found out is that the digital divide isn't just a rural problem. It's a problem that spans throughout our state. And even in our urban core, we have a lot of families that really do not have what today is really just another utility, right? So it's not a luxury to have good internet service. It's really something that we truly need throughout just to be part of society today. And so we're going to break down a little bit about what that digital divide means, give you some numbers here for our state, what we're working with, and then have a great conversation with two educators who are working on policy and that are even in our schools working on the front lines with our families who are working to get the right speed and the reliability on a regular basis for their students in school. So the digital divide refers to the inequality in access to technology that exists between communities due to regional and demographic differences. And really, like, who has access, who doesn't, how can you get on the internet? And in the COVID area, when so many of us are working from home, we have school from home, and we're meeting people from all around the United States to talk about policy from home, it's really necessary. And so looking at the issue nationally as it refers to education, a Pew Research Center poll conducted earlier this spring in April of 2020 talked to parents, and they identified problems from students learning from home. And 1 in 5 parents said that their kids did not have access to a computer at home. In lower income families, that number jumped to more than 1 in 3. I have a kindergartner. We couldn't have done it without the 3rd laptop. Can't even fathom if you're like in real school. Nothing against kindergartners. 1 in 5 parents said their children did not have access to a reliable internet connection. And in lower income families, again, that number increased 2 to 5. And about 3 in 10 parents reported that their children would have to do their homework on the phone. I don't know about you, but there's no way I could write a term paper on my phone. And so in lower income families, again, no surprise, that number jumps up to 4 in 10. So when you bring that closer here in Indiana, you know, and there were lots of great stories of folks really trying to figure it out and come together, there was still really kind of a lack of access. In a very recent Ball State University report from July of this past year, with Indiana-specific data, broke it down by county and public school system, reports that up to 84,000 K-12 students lack the internet access at home to be successful. And so the conclusion of that story, again, coming from rural America, I just thought that was a problem that we had outside of kind of the donut, right? But no, it's really the most urban areas and the most rural areas share that same issue when looking at that digital divide. And so while today we're talking about that when it comes to education, the digital divide is also something that truly impacts hospitals, access to healthcare, in rural areas in particular, the ability for telemedicine, remote radiology readings, and so forth. And so it really impacts the quality of life. And so we're excited to talk about this tonight and to learn more about what our leaders are looking at and how we can be part of that solution. So I am excited to talk with Patrick McAlister. He is the director of the Office of Education Innovation. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit. He and I are going to talk about this issue of the digital divide and access to broadband and technology. Patrick brings a variety of experience to bear on the topic, and prior to joining the Office of Education Innovation, he served as Director of Policy for the Indiana Department of Education, where he managed the development of Every Student Succeeds Act. He worked at Teach Plus Indiana, and he started his career as a teacher in grades 5 through 12 in both traditional public and public charter schools. So Patrick, take yourself off mute and welcome.
Thanks for having me here, everybody.
All right. So we'll just jump right in. So Patrick, as we talked about some of the facts and laid the landscape, what would you say is really the biggest issue facing our families today?
So I think it's important to center this conversation around those most in need, as I think our presidential candidate Joe Biden does. The gaps that existed prior to COVID and through the digital divide were only exacerbated by the experience of going online for education. If you think about what you need to just get to the starting gate of online learning, you need to have high-speed internet, and you have to have enough devices, high-speed internet for all of the children in the family, and that everyone can access, and you need enough devices for those students to learn online. And essentially, you're all of a sudden in March, you were adding costs to a family's budget that were just not really accessible for working folks. For many working folks. And so those with privilege, those who had access to the internet at home, who had broadband, those students who had devices, and specifically either tablets or laptops, were able to access online learning. And I think the other thing that I'll say is, and Eddie can speak to this probably better than I can, but online learning isn't great. Anyone who has little ones know that it's hard to keep them engaged. It's not, you're not getting the pieces of school that you need. The relationships, the social and emotional development is much more difficult in a virtual space. And so you're getting something that's not that great. And it also requires you personally to have more things at home in order to do that. And then I guess the final thing that I'll say, because I've probably given you more than a couple, but the final stumbling block that I'll say is it's not designed for working folks. If you have an hourly job and you're in a two-parent, if all of the adults in the house are working, imagine trying to manage a third grader online while also working. That's just for those who have the privilege of working at home. If you're an hourly worker, it is even harder. And so at least in Indianapolis, we've tried to cut down as many of those barriers as possible with a variety of programs. But you're adding so many different layers of challenge for families who already are struggling so deeply, especially during this crisis.
Thank you, Patrick. That was an excellent perspective setting. So in your position, you get the opportunity to probably look at best practices, to talk to other colleagues around the country. What are some innovative things that you've seen working? Are there things that we can bring to bear, not just in Indianapolis, but statewide, that can really assist our families when it comes to access to connectivity and managing online school?
So I think the other kind of the set of unsung heroes are many right now in public education, but the adaptability and malleability of teachers has just been phenomenal. The schools that we oversee, and our office primarily oversees 40 public charter schools, including Eddie's school, that serve about 16,000 students just in Indianapolis. And our schools adapted very quickly to providing virtual instruction. Our communities have come together to do some great investments. Our office was able to work with the philanthropic community to create a fund to both support purchasing devices for families that need them, purchasing internet access for families that need them, and also creating a space for best practices where teachers and parents and administrators can share what actually works with online education. So that was the Indiana e-learning lab, and that is available to any parent and any teacher in Indiana. You can log on, learn how to use Google Classroom, learn how to use kind of all of these other tools that exist. and get some training for yourself if you're either caring for students or you're a teacher kind of needs to learn. So we've seen a lot of sharing of lessons. We've seen a lot of sharing of the different kinds of instruction that exists for students. It's just been really heartening to see how teachers have come together in this time to kind of support families and learn how to learn in a different way. I guess the last thing I'll say is that online education has existed prior to March of this year. And there are some that have been doing this for a long time. It just overall has not been very good for K-12 students specifically. And so you're seeing everyone kind of learning together. You're seeing programs and structures that were there for kind of temporary, historically at least temporary instruction. Many school districts had virtual days when you had a snow day, so 1 or 2 days a year, students would learn online. But that infrastructure wasn't designed for kind of long-term day in and day out classroom instruction. So teachers are incredibly adaptable. They're learning how to do their work in a different environment and learning from each other. And so that's heartening. But again, this was not the way it was supposed to be designed.
Yeah, and I can second that. I have a daughter who's a first grader and she's online school right now. I also serve on the board of Hoosier Academy, which is one of the state's first virtual charter schools. And, we've been around for a decade now, and online school is not for everyone. And just because, and even in that setup or paradigm, even then you needed a learning coach and a supportive parent. It is never been where you just pop your kid in front of a laptop and go about your business. It really does take a lot of parent time. And when you're talking about those 2-parent working households with multiple students, certainly the need for better quality infrastructure on the Wi-Fi and the fiber and better digital access in addition to the learning platforms is really something that I think if we all take a deep breath and think back to February, we've come miles. Still got a long way to go. We can still make it easier for everybody, but my goodness, how much things have changed in very short order. So Patrick and certainly Principal Rangel, just like weigh in here because you're out there doing it every day with a school that's fully virtual right now or online. With your families and everything, so I know last spring, I believe IPS and some others utilized, I believe, Wish TV 8 for some of the classroom learning. Was that something that helped alleviate some of the pressure of the lack of Wi-Fi and connectivity, or was that perhaps not a solution?
So I think the benefit of the TV programs is that they're broadly accessible, but it requires you to be able to access them at a specific time. And if you are able to access the video, any sort of video virtually, you would have access to the internet and kind of all the things you need to do online. So I think IPS did a great job to kind of do that stopgap measure in the spring, but the best thing we can do for kids is to make sure that they have the stuff they need to learn virtually. And so that's what I think our kind of relentless focus through the Indianapolis e-learning fund, through the grants that we've applied for, through the corporate and philanthropic funding that we've had, is to get stuff that kids need so that teachers like the teachers at Adelante schools that Eddie is executive director of can do their work. And so that's been kind of our overriding kind of relentless focus.
Could I ask a question in here?
Sure.
Well, I'm not hearing something that I think is critically important to this topic, and that is the budgets of the school districts.
Yeah.
The school districts' budgets, and the reason that you see disparity not only between rural areas and most urban areas and urban areas are the school budgets, which are based on taxation. And so the schools are supported by taxes. And in those districts where they have low tax bases, they have no money. And in the school districts that have high tax bases, they have more money. And I'm looking for somebody at the state level, legislation that will address that problem, because with that, that's basic, systemic. You're never going to get past online learning to a good degree until we solve that problem. That's at least I'll get off my soapbox.
Please stand on that soapbox every single day. That is a systemic issue that we need to, I think, more fulsomely address. While the state has moved more towards a per pupil funding, where there's a basic tuition support and then complexity that was added on top of it, some districts have the resources to run referenda campaigns to increase the amount of money that they spend on their operational budget. So those who have higher incomes and higher property tax bases can do that, I think, in a more kind of robust way. And so you are seeing, the difference is exacerbated even more due to kind of the funding structures that we have. I think a partial solve for that would be, I think, expanding tuition support, expanding the complexity, which accounts for poverty and accounts for other sort of complexities on top from the state. The other, not to get into the Joe Biden part of the solution, but the other part of this would be to significantly increase the amount of money we spend federally through Title I, and also fully fund special education and increase the funding for English language learners. That money can go more directly towards the schools that have those massive gaps and can kind of help close some of those areas. But you're right. The funding gap is a systemic issue that no philanthropy, no one-time grants will be able to solve in kind of a long-term systemic way.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to, we got a couple more questions, and then we're going to talk to our principal who's on the front lines on week number 2 to give us some unique perspective there. And so, Patrick, if you could provide just 2 things to every Hoosier student in the state, K through 12, what do they need?
It would be a hotspot if they don't have internet access at home, and a tablet if they are K2, or a laptop if they are grades 3 and up. It doesn't matter how great the teacher training and support is, or the structures that the school provides around instruction. If kiddos can't access the internet, if families can't have multiple devices and enough broadband to actually do the online learning that they need, they're never, ever, ever going to close that gap over the next couple of years. And so we've at the city have raised private funding and we gave it directly to our schools to try and address that immediate need. We also just received $11.5 million from the state. We, being all the public schools, the traditional public school districts in Marion County and the public charter schools in Marion County, received $11.5 million. All that's going to go to schools. IPS and many of the districts have already invested heavily in purchasing devices. We also negotiated an RFP with T-Mobile to get hotspots for $15 per month per user. If you sign a 2-year agreement, if a district signs a 2-year agreement, if it's a 1-year agreement, it's $20 per month per user. All of this is stuff for the next couple of years, but the divide and the need for greater access to high-speed internet can't be solved just by hotspots.
And what kind of a life cycle do you see? I mean, in 3 years, all this stuff you're buying now is going to be obsolete. What are you going to do then?
So I would encourage if folks want to lean in and get involved in that piece. The vast majority of the public school districts, certainly here in central Indiana and around the state, have foundations attached to them that are raising money to help offset some of that. But to your point, Russ, and this is good for now. And kids aren't always the easiest on laptops. So best case scenario, they got a 3-year lifespan. You ever drop a juice box on one? Cuts that right down. So this will actually be an ongoing need for technology and to refresh that. And then I want to talk just one more question, and then we're going to pivot because that's everybody's favorite word in the pandemic. But we know that our fellow Hoosiers are struggling to keep food on the table. Unemployment rates are going up, starting to level off a little bit, but still a huge concern from where we were in January and February. So struggling to keep food on the table and keep the lights on, where stable high-speed internet seems like a luxury, and we all know it's not. What can we do to help our fellow Hoosier families struggling to provide that quality, reliable service to their students? So we know hotspots are one answer. Do you work with some of our local community centers? I think some of them have some programs to help families out. What other things have you heard of?
Yeah, so some of our nonprofits came together and created e-learning sites with schools being physically closed. And those are safe places that parents can sign up for bringing their child to this place and have them do their e-learning there. They have to bring their own device, but there will be adults there to make sure that they're safe. They will be served 2 meals. These are in community centers and churches in mostly central Indianapolis. The problem is that they only have 500 spots. So we have 150,000 students in Indianapolis and Marion County. So these efforts are happening at a local level around the state for schools that are virtual. I think the other thing that we need to really focus on is we need to elect more Democrats. They're the ones that are willing to spend the resources to pay for things that people need. Federally, we need to have a president who wants to invest in schools again. We need more money to flow to low-income schools, schools that serve high special needs, schools that serve English learners. The other thing that I think we can take a look at in terms of federal policy is allowing school districts to use what's called E-rate funding in a more flexible way. E-rate is a funding source from the federal governments that public schools and libraries can use to build their broadband kind of basis a little bit bigger. If schools were allowed some flexibility and an increased amount of funding, we could potentially use E-rate to help expand the access to broadband. There are some other technical solutions beyond the public utility kind of space there. If you theoretically, and I'm by the way not a technical expert in the internet or broadband. I want to make sure that I want to kind of name that. This is what I've heard from experts that I've engaged with. But there is a potential opportunity if you have a tighter geographic area to essentially create a cell-based broadband that could be broadcasted out into neighborhoods as a potential solution that is not necessarily a public utility, but if one were able to do that, you could potentially expand the access of Wi-Fi using various public facilities like schools, properties that are owned by a city, and using a band of wireless that allows you to do that. So there are a variety of different options available that we're trying to explore here, at least in central Indiana.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Are you able to stick around for a bit?
Sure.
All right, because I know we have questions in the chat that we will toss up to either you or Principal Ronhel. So time to unmute yourself, Principal. We want to know what's going on the day-to-day on the front lines and working with our students. And if you wouldn't mind, just start by sharing a little bit about your background and what you're doing today, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, thank you for having me, everyone. Really appreciate the conversation thus far, especially conversation around school funding, because without the many measures that Patrick's already mentioned, our entire remote or virtual learning model would not be possible at Emadonin Elementary and Middle School, which is where I serve as both the elementary school principal and the executive director. So I got my start teaching in IPS at Key Learning Community right across the river from Lucas Oil. I then joined a public charter school network in the city as an assistant principal, became a principal, and then just recently transitioned as the executive director to Adelante Schools, which is a mayor-sponsored charter school here in Indianapolis. I think I go back to one story from last week, third grade. We've got a student named Angeli. Angeli's mom has 3 children, and I am observing, as the principal, observing the classroom instruction on, a day 2 or 3 of instruction. And I see Angeli take her Chromebook that she has, picks up her MiFi, and as she's got her headphones in listening to her teacher's math instruction, she gets in her car. Where, everyone else is on Zoom. You can see Angeli just in her car answering questions with the teacher, gets out of her car, walks into her mom's restaurant where mom works, sits down at a table, gets served a bowl of chips, starts munching on some chips, and then unmutes herself, answers a couple more math questions, and gets right back into her math work. And it's a beautiful narrative, the resilience of what we're seeing from families and from kids, because no one knows what this looks like in a perfect world. We, as I was sharing before we all got on, most folks are building the plane as we fly it. Even though, to Patrick's point, remote learning is not a new thing per se. For kindergartners, as I'm sure, Michelle, you can attest to, it is very new and it's very challenging. But again, it wouldn't even be fathomable without the support that we've experienced here in Indianapolis, from both the funding perspective and from this community sense of sharing. And I know Patrick just mentioned this earlier about everyone is opening their doors, sharing struggles and just being incredibly transparent about the realness of the situation and how we can grow stronger together.
I do that at least one meeting every day. And tonight it's for you all. I talk while I'm muted. So we did have one question about like some nitty gritty strategy, and that is from my friend Elle. And she asked, is it viable to have asynchronous online classes for K-12 to help working parents?
Yeah, I specifically think about our model. 100% of our families actually qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so that means we have a lot of working families. And when we were discussing during the summer what our remote learning plan would look like, the completely synchronous version was not an option, because we know that families like Angeli's are in transition at 9 a.m. in the morning. Now, in a regular school day, they would drop their scholars off and start the school day along with everyone else at 7:30 in the morning and go until 2:10. But we know that that wasn't going to be possible, nor is it something that we should expect families to have to stick and abide to. And so we had to get really specific and strategic about providing the recorded lessons, creating very crystal clear systems for posting where a resource is going to be, and then providing support for families. I think day 1 through 3 was actually everyone learning, including families, where to access materials, how to check in with their teachers, what direct lines of support were available to them, both from a tech side and then from an instructional side. And so the asynchronous part is, if you aren't able to log in at the time that we're doing live lessons, then here's exactly where you can find all the resources that your child needs. And then to the other part, we know that a big part of school is the social emotional experience, building relationships. I'm going to tell another quick story of a first grader who we have open discussion lunches where the teachers just leave the Zoom room up and kids just get to talk, with a teacher, of course, in the Zoom room. But we had a couple first graders who just nonstop for 20 minutes. And the teacher says, "Boy, you have a lot of things to say." And one little girl goes, "We haven't seen each other in forever." And her reaction was like, yeah, kids need this interaction. And for so long, They haven't had play dates. They haven't had school. And we're seeing attendance actually be much different than we anticipated as well, especially in our lower grades. A lot of families opting for synchronous learning, no matter what it takes in their school schedule, because kids want to be in the lessons. And the middle schoolers, their parents are like, okay, early in the morning is going to be rough for them, but they're going to be there. And they've also started turning the corner and logging into more synchronous lessons, just to build that community.
So for our folks on the call, and this is being recorded for future folks, so not everybody has little kids in school or even big kids in school. Walk us through what a typical day right now may look like for you, your teachers, and your students.
So our synchronous instruction starts at 9 a.m. And we have 45-minute blocks. We did not cut any curricular topics. I think a lot of schools, to make it flexible, unfortunately said, we're going to prioritize math and reading instruction. At our school, in our model, we specifically believe that science and global literacy is what we call it. Those actually make better mathematicians and better readers. And so they've got about 45-minute blocks of each of those topics, with not every single minute being something that a child has to be logged in live. Teachers most often use a 20-minute mini lesson, or what we call direct instruction of, these are the things that you need to know today to be successful in your independent work. We also have a team of teachers, and we gave them the option. A lot of teachers expressed, especially those with children, that it was difficult in the spring to teach from home and take care of kids both on the screen and in their home. And so we have teachers coming into the building to do their synchronous lessons, so that they have all of the materials in front of them. They have their classroom. And we're specifically really focused on a technique that we call dissolve the screen. We really want kids to feel like they are in their classroom with their peers, with their teacher. And so the teacher's in the classroom, they've got the anchor chart up, they've got the manipulatives. And another thing that kids were provided were manipulatives, things to actually move around and learn with, instead of just being on a computer all the time. And so the school day, although it runs from 9 to 2, which is a little bit shorter than an in-person day, we believe it's age appropriate. Of course, kindergartner isn't sitting on a computer for 45 minutes listening to teacher instruction. First 2 days, we're teaching kindergarten through third grade how to mute and unmute, which I still have a problem with as well, talking while I'm muted. And then, for middle school scholars, it was how to have robust conversations in breakout rooms and how to use those tools with teachers. And then, teaching teachers how to record their lessons so that they can post them asynchronously. We're using screen recording techniques on their MacBooks, where they, just screen record, make a movie, and then upload it to Google Classroom. And so the days are exciting. We are not perfect by any means. We are very fortunate, as Patrick said, the adaptability of teachers has been inspiring, because no one is throwing their hands up at this moment. Everyone's saying, okay, so this is our reality. Now what are we going to do about it? And we've seen that time and time again throughout the spring and into the summer.
Thank you. A couple of questions have popped up in the chat, and I'm going to ask those on behalf of folks. And so Alan asked, what about kids with vision or hearing issues? How are they adapting? Do they have the tech that they need to keep up and with their peers and stay connected?
Yeah, that is something we've been very cognizant of, both students who have different abilities, and then our English language learners. This is where, again, teachers who are specifically our music, fitness, foreign language teachers are plugging into the general education classroom because they are licensed teachers as well, and supporting those scholars. So it's literally all hands on deck. As well as our special education teachers, who are the teachers of record, making sure that students with different abilities are being provided the supports needed. we, again, through a grant from the state, the CARES Act funds, we were able to provide our teachers with cell phones. Because the last thing we wanted to do is for a teacher to have to use their personal cell phone plan to make all these contacts throughout the day. And so teachers and families have direct cell phone lines to each other. And so if it's, hey, I noticed that your scholar needs a little bit extra support in here, let me give them a call. Let's get on a personal Zoom after the school day and whatever works best for your schedule so that we can provide the supports. And then it's been getting really literate with technology, especially for our scholars who have vision impairments, making sure that the text is large enough for them to read on the screen, making sure that if it is a scholar who is visually impaired, we are providing the texts at their home so that they can read along in person with different size texts. And again, we're still finding things that have been blind spots. And when those issues arise through communication, we problem solve as quickly as possible to make sure that every kid is receiving what they need.
Awesome.
I can also just quickly add that the Indiana School for the Blind and Visually Impaired and Indiana School for the Deaf have been incredible resources for districts on these specific challenges of visual impairment and hearing challenges. Essentially, from my conversations, it requires more expensive technology to engage virtually. And so both of those schools have done a great job of kind of connecting with families. Some students are both students of those schools and also students of their home districts. So they're getting support kind of in both spaces. But again, all of that requires more money. And I think to Russ's point, this is a money issue. And we absolutely need Democrats elected so that we can make sure our schools are properly funded.
All right, I think we have time for one question, but it's a doozy. So get ready, gentlemen. So even prior to COVID, mental health resources and social emotional supports for our students in schools were already something that were cut pretty lean. We have talk of, 2 social workers in 6 schools having to kind of ride a circuit and touch in with kids when they could. So tell us how students and families are accessing those supports now. And then also we had a question about students who are just not participating, the chronic tardiness and absenteeism, and certainly that may make it a little bit easier to hide now. So tell us how that looks today.
I think, and this is only from my experience, but again, we are borrowing from our friends in Indianapolis. I've heard a lot of school leader friends say, we are prioritizing wherever we have to find it, the funds for social workers. We were in a little bit different context where, this year we were able to hire a social worker full-time for the school, and then have a community-based partner in the school as well who does social work. And to the second point of that question about providing like the social emotional support and kids who are having trouble getting inspired to do digital learning, that's when those social workers and our Dean of Students have been integral. We actually just completed home visits for scholars who have not shown up digitally. And it was as simple as, we have a different email that you've been emailing us and we actually don't have technology. So, it was, okay, great. Here's a Chromebook, here's a hotspot. Now you can log in. But it was, it takes a lot of assuming the best from us to say, there's a barrier. There's got to be a barrier somewhere. Where can we find the barrier and how can we get past it to provide scholars with the education that they deserve? And the other thing, our partners at Indianapolis Public Schools, for example, for McKinney-Vento students who are experiencing homelessness, have opened learning hubs specific for homeless students that a lot of the innovation partners in Indianapolis are able to leverage as well. And so we have students who are experiencing homelessness who are now being provided transportation to those learning hubs to be supervised and then be able to access everything that a child with a roof over the head is able to access as well.
That's fantastic. Patrick, do you have anything you want to add on either of those supports or work?
Yeah, I don't want to, I think, get off of the funding hobby horse here.
Keep riding it.
The CARES Act funding, I think, was necessary, but it's certainly not sufficient for all of the costs that are associated with this. We have teachers and social workers and administrators doing incredible work to do outreach to the communities that they serve, but there just isn't enough time, and there aren't enough folks who are doing this work. I think when we have count day, which is the day that the state counts students to determine state funding, we're going to see a lot of students who are missing in that number. Yeah. We have, 1 million students around the state. Last year we had around 150,000 students in Marion County. Despite our best efforts, there are going to be students who are not going to be counted. And that's for a variety of reasons that are not specifically about school, but could be about other things that they're experiencing. I'm at the city. My boss is the mayor. I work with a lot of other folks that run other departments in the city, and housing with the expiration of the state moratorium on evictions and the Trump decision not to renew the $600 a month unemployment insurance, we are going to see a massive number of families who are going to experience some level of instability around housing, whether it be homelessness or some level of transience to different family members or just trying to figure it out, and that's going to impact whether or not students are going to show up to school. So yeah.
And to the funding point, when you lose lots of students on the count day,
right.
I mean, there's a direct correlation in the per pupil times the formula times
right.
equals your budget, and
right.
you suddenly miss a few thousand students. It matters.
Fortunately, yes. Fortunately, we count twice a year, so there could be an opportunity to, if we are able to get the right administration in and get some things a little bit more stable, count again and bring those students back in. But this is a tough year. It's going to be a tough year in public education. I'm not trying to, I don't want to sound too down, and I'm trying to give you all the kind of innovative pieces that we're working on, but it's hard, and it's going to be hard this year. And we're going to see a lot of things that I think have been happening for a long time that we're going to see more of.
All right, well, we are going to take the last few minutes to talk about Vice President Biden's work that he's doing around broadband and education and his policies that he's got out there. As always, we encourage you to go to the website, and we've got the address here. We're going to pop up real quick. And so one thing that is just in black and white, super clarity, is that Vice President Biden, when he's president, will expand broadband to every American. The digital divide needs to be, it's a gap that needs closed. In rural areas by investing $20 billion in broadband infrastructure, and the math on that is that it will create more than 250,000 new jobs. Establishing partnerships with utility companies to bring fiber broadband to rural communities is a true game changer. And again, it's not just for education. That will impact healthcare. It will impact manufacturing. It will impact small businesses. It will not, it will pay dividends for the next generations. Making sure teachers and students can work and learn in safe and healthy environments. And so this is a fact that I find just fascinating. And that is that each year, the US underfunds school infrastructure by $46 billion. And part of that is in building new schools. And if you could flip to the next one, Terry. Go back one. She's quick. So we underfund our schools, and that's really into the physical plants of the schools are not getting updated. We have students in some very, very old schools that are not really safe, and certainly not as smart a building as they could be in. And so investing resources for our schools so that students grow into physically and emotionally healthy adults, and educators can focus on teaching. So Congress should pass $30 billion to allow schools to reopen safely, including up to $4 billion to upgrade technology and broadband, and direct a White House-led initiative to address gaps in learning exacerbated by COVID. And again, looking at that $46 billion that's underinvested in those budgets every year to bridge that gap on that funding, to update our schools, bring in smarter classrooms to focus on that STEM education. So really, so critically important that all of us as supporters, and if you weren't before tonight, we hope you're on our team, go to joebiden.com and look at those policies. I mean, he's not just skimming the surface. They are deep, deep policies with real solutions that will pay dividends for all of us in this country, and really set up the next generation and the generation after that for success. True success, not just success for a small group of people. So it's probably about 20 different areas of emphasis on the website that goes deep into policy. And so last time we touched on healthcare. Today we talked education and digital divide. Coming up, we have more great topics. In October, we're also going to look at jobs and economy, and looking at manufacturing. All right, Terry, let's talk about what else we have coming up and how people can get plugged in. You're muted now.
I did it. One of the things we hoped these sessions would do was just inspire you to get involved and think about what you can do. And one thing you can do with our website is just go there and sign up for our training sessions, our discussion series, our weekly meetings, support our candidates on social media. There's that famous one, donate to campaigns, host virtual events, and sign up for activities to volunteer. I want to stop sharing here for a minute. Oh, there I'm back. Hello, Michelle. I want to thank Patrick and Eddie for this discussion. It was great, and of course, thanks to Michelle for what she does to moderate and pull it all together. There are a lot of things in the chat for you all to look at and reference. There's Patrick put in a reference for the e-learning sites. There's a reference there to the Joe's education policy. So if you want, you can save the chat and look at it later. And I hope I will see all of you at a future discussion series, or tomorrow night at our disinformation series. And thank you again, Patrick, and thank you again, Eddie, so much.
And thank you, Terry and Mary, for being with us. And for,
thank you.
Let's go get it done.
That's right. It makes a difference. I will say good night. Thank you.
Heather, we see you with the laundry and the little one. You, and we thank you, girl. Multitasking, getting it done.
Good night.
I'm a woman. It's what I do, you know?
Exactly. She's just doing a normal day in the life.
I'm a woman. It's what I do.
We
so
almost had
you
the
guys.
first grader. She was up there. I heard her, but she didn't come down. So about the
We
only
enjoyed
meeting
the
today
pillow
she
fight.
hasn't crashed.
Oh, I'm glad. I pretty much figured you guys would like enjoy that. I was like, I've done folding laundry. It's not boring anymore. Like, he's fun.
That's what we do, right? It's 2020.
Exactly. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Fine. Thank you.
Bye.